Some bad news has come out for veterans and current serving members of the U.S. military. 38 U.S. service members committed suicide in July, which is the highest month total since records began in 2009. Now, this is double what it was the previous month. 26 were currently serving. The Marine Corps and Air Force suicides were also up as well. Now, the Army has traditionally, at least since records began, have had a higher rate of suicide than the Marine Corps, the Air Force, or the Navy, because they're the biggest contingent of the ground forces in both Iraq and Afghanistan and tend to take up most of the action that actually takes place on the ground. Now, this doubling of suicides in one month is just simply unbelievable, and speaks to the real character of what's actually going on in these imperialist wars and how the people who are fighting these wars are actually reacting to them. Now, General Lloyd J. Austin III, the Army's Vice Chief of Staff, is the man who's actually tasked with dealing with the epidemic of suicides among active duty personnel and veterans, and this is what he had to say on the matter. "Suicide is the toughest enemy I have faced in my 37 years in the military. That said, I do believe suicide is preventable. To combat it effectively will require sophisticated solutions aimed at helping individuals to build resiliency and strengthen their life coping skills." Now, obviously, there are two main barriers to getting proper mental health care out to veterans and active duty personnel. One is budgets. Not a lot of resources is really put all towards mental health. Even veteran care in general isn't even being done that well. And both Barack Obama and George Bush are both responsible for cutting those programs. George Bush did do it during his 8 years as president. He did cut a lot of the funding to veterans programs, while then turning around and claiming that he loves the troops and he supports them. But George Bush was full of a lot of contradictions. The second is overcoming the social stigma that surrounds mental illness, something that has always been an issue, even so much so in civilian society, and does not seem like it's going away anytime soon. Anybody who's ever admitted to having any kind of mental health issue is stigmatized a certain way and looked at in a different way for the rest of their life. And I would imagine in an over-macho kind of environment like the military would be exacerbated to a terrifying degree. I couldn't imagine how bad it would be in the military to admit that you had a mental health issue as a result of what was going on. I mean, there's so much macho bravado behind anything, and the overly hyped stereotypical perception of what masculinity is certainly possibly, I would think, that the single largest barrier to actually getting help for these mental health issues. And it shows, just so much of what these imperialist wars are actually about, and how the people who are carrying these wars out are actually suffering for something that's supposed to be so great and so honorable, and they're doing the right thing. Why is this happening? Because there's a huge backlash of movement by soldiers who are saying that it's their life, so it's their choice. I'm not sure, I don't remember if that's the actual model, but it's something to that effect. That's their lives on the line, so they do have a say in it, which is awfully ironic coming from people in the military who've signed a contract to blindly follow the orders that they were given. But even though having gone in and having understood this, at least to a degree, they're starting to wake up once again and realize what's happening. You can sign up to the military with the best intentions that you could ever have for defending your country, defending freedom. I mean, even if you really believe that, eventually along the way you're going to realize that that's not the way things really are. And if you do realize that's what's going on, and that you're not defending freedom, and that your actions are violating the Constitution or just international law, whatever, you do have a right to be able to stop if you notice that what you're doing is not what You were told it is that you were going to be doing it. Think of it like the contract. The military would be theoretically violating the contract that they put before you. So then you would have theoretically a right to resist that and to go back to that contract and possibly invalidate it if you felt like it was necessary. But this is what's really going on. And consider this. Even with all the suffering that the troops are currently facing, it is infinitesimal compared to the suffering that the people in Afghanistan are going through. When a soldier eventually admits that his mental illness from whatever is too much, that he just can't take anymore and seeks professional help, and as good as that is nowhere near an option for the Afghani people who've suffered hundreds of times more than the troops have. Thousands of times more than the people in this country have as a result of the war. In terms of us, the regular population, this war has just cost us cash. All we've done is basically pay for it. We haven't had any real suffering. The troops have had actual suffering because they're the ones who have to go through all of it. Now, even that, what the Afghan people go through is 100 times anything the troops go through. And they have no support whatsoever. If you had a mental health issue in Afghanistan, you're finished. You would have basically nothing to go to. There might be a couple of places in the entire country where someone might be able to go. And there's a whole ton of factors. Affordability, economic concerns that the person who has to go and get this help may be the actual breadwinner for the family, and if they go and do that, then they can't, get an income for their family to feed their kids, to feed their wives. It's just the situation for the Afghani people is immeasurably worse than it is for the troops. So I mean, every time that somebody does think about the troops and think about how much they're suffering, think about the 100 or maybe 1,000 times more the people of Afghanistan are actually suffering. And they've got no support whatsoever. There is support in the U.S. military or the military forces of NATO and the occupiers, but there is nothing for the people of Afghanistan. They've got it far worse than we can even imagine. And I think all of this suffering really speaks to what this imperialist conquest of Afghanistan and Iraq is really all about.